Chapter 14, Lesson 1, Cells in Life. Let's look at our reading guide, our key concepts. Our essential questions are: how did scientists' understanding of cells develop, and what basic substances make up a cell? So we've talked about atoms, we've talked about molecules, so we're going to go into macromolecules and how those macromolecules make up a cell. As we move into Lesson 2, we'll also be looking at the different organelles in the cell. So first of all, we'll look at cell theory. We'll learn about macromolecules, particularly the four types of macromolecules: nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. On page 497, Understanding Cells. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and tried to find other planets in our solar system? It is hard to see them without using a telescope. This is because the other planets are millions of kilometers away. Just like we can use telescopes to see other planets, we can use microscopes to see the basic units of all living things, cells. But people didn't always know about cells. Because cells are so small, early scientists had no tools to study them. It took hundreds of years for scientists to learn about cells. More than 300 years ago, an English scientist named Robert Hooke built a microscope. He used the microscope to look at cork, which is part of a cork oak tree's bark, just like the corks that you find in a bottle, like the cork that's in a bottle. Okay, so looking at cork. What he saw looked like the openings in a honeycomb, as shown in Figure 1. The openings reminded him of the small rooms called cells where monks lived. He called the structures cells, from the Latin word cellula, which means small rooms. This is approximately what Robert Hooke would have seen under his microscope. So to him, the cells of the cork looked like the openings in a honeycomb. Okay, so Robert Hooke was one of the important people in cell theory. Let's read about some others. So after Hooke's discovery, other scientists began making better microscopes and looking for cells in many other places, such as pond water and blood. The newer microscopes enabled scientists to see different structures inside cells. Matthias Schleiden, a German scientist, used one of the new microscopes to look at plant cells. Around the same time, another German scientist, Theodor Schwann, used a microscope to study animal cells. Schleiden and Schwann realized that plant and animal cells have similar features. You'll read about many of these features in Lesson 2. So that's when we'll look at organelles. Almost 2 decades later, Rudolf Virchow, a German doctor, proposed that all cells come from pre-existing cells, or cells that already exist. The observations made by Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow were combined into one theory. As illustrated in Table 1, the cell theory states that all living things are made of one or more cells. The cell is the smallest unit of life, and all new cells come from pre-existing cells. So those are the 3 tenets of the cell theory. After the development of the cell theory, scientists raised more questions about cells. If all living things are made of cells, what are cells made of? Let's look at the key concept check. How did scientists' understanding of cells develop? Scientists' understanding developed by using better microscopes and looking for cells in many different places. So until they had the microscope, they couldn't understand cells. But once the technology developed, then the science became evident. And so you'll see that with science and technology, the development of technology increases the amount of science that we know. And as we know more science, we also increase our technology. All right, let's look at the Table 1 cell theory. This shows us the 3 different tenets that we talked about. So all living things are made of one or more cells. The cell is the smallest unit of life, and all new cells come from pre-existing cells. Basic cell substance on page 499. Have you ever watched a train travel down a railroad track? The locomotive pulls train cars that are hooked together. Like a train, many of the substances in cells are made of smaller parts that are joined together. These substances, called macromolecules, form by joining many small molecules together. As you will read later in this lesson, macromolecules have many important roles in cells. But macromolecules cannot function without one of the most important substances in cells, water. Okay, so before we move on to water, the different parts of the macromolecules, these many small molecules that we're talking about, there's a special word that we use for them, and it's called monomer. Okay, so you'll see that word in some of the things that I give you, or for example, it might be a word that I've put into the Quizlet vocabulary, but monomer is just, if you think about the macromolecules as made up of different smaller molecules that are attached together, a monomer is just a part of it. It's just like one car in the train. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that word, monomer. The main ingredient, water. The main ingredient in any cell is water. It makes up more than 70% of a cell's volume and is essential for life. Why is water such an important molecule? Well, in addition to making up a large part of the inside of cells, water also surrounds cells. The water surrounding your cells helps to insulate your body, which maintains homeostasis, or a stable internal environment. The structure of water molecules makes it ideal for dissolving many other substances. Substances must be in a liquid to move into and out of cells. A water molecule has two areas. An area that is more negative, called the negative end, and this end can attract the positive part of another substance. And then an area that is more positive, called the positive end. This end can attract the negative part of another substance. Examine figure 2 to see how the positive and negative ends of water molecules dissolve salt crystals. Okay, here we can see that the water molecules are made up of oxygen and hydrogen, and the oxygen is slightly more negative and the hydrogen is slightly more positive. We call this polarity. Okay, and you're going to learn all about this next year, because we'll talk about how the protons inside of the oxygen have a stronger pull on the electrons that the hydrogen and the oxygen share. And so because the oxygen has more protons, it pulls more strongly on those electrons. So they hang out with the oxygen more than they hang out with the hydrogen. And so because of that, it causes a slight polarity, just like the poles, like magnetic poles or the poles of the earth that we've talked about. That's what that word polarity comes from. So the oxygen is slightly more positive, the oxygen is slightly more negative, and the hydrogen is slightly more positive. Okay, so because of that, there are different parts of salt, the sodium and the chloride, and the chloride is more negative, so it's attracted to the more positive ends of the water molecule. The sodium is more positive, and so it's attracted to the negative, the oxygen, the negative ends of the water molecule. And so that's what's happening. That's one of the reasons why water is ideal for dissolving things, because the different parts of molecules that dissolve in water can be attracted to the different parts of the water molecule. Macromolecules. Although water is essential for life, all cells contain other substances that enable them to function. Recall that macromolecules are large molecules that form when smaller molecules join together. As shown in figure 3, there are 4 types of macromolecules in cells: nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. Each type of macromolecule has unique functions in a cell. These functions range from growth and communication to movement and storage. All right, let's look at the 4 different types of macromolecules. So nucleic acids contain genetic information. So that's like DNA and RNA. Proteins work to communicate. They transport. They break down chemicals and substances, like enzymes are made up of proteins. They provide structural support. Proteins do most of the things in our cells. They're very, very important. Then lipids, they're the energy storage. They protect membranes. They make up protective membranes. They communicate. And then carbohydrates are mostly energy storage and structural support and communication. Let's look at each of these. At the bottom of page 500, let's look at nucleic acids. So both deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, and ribonucleic acid, or RNA, are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are macromolecules that form when long chains of molecules called nucleotides join together. The order of nucleotides in DNA and RNA is important. If you change the order of words in a sentence, you could change the meaning of the sentence. In a similar way, changing the order of nucleotides in DNA and RNA can change the genetic information in a cell. Nucleic acids are important in cells because they contain genetic information. This information can pass from parents to offspring. DNA includes instructions for cell growth, cell reproduction, and cell processes that enable a cell to respond to its environment. DNA is used to make RNA, and RNA is used to make proteins. Proteins, on page 501. The macromolecules necessary for nearly everything cells do are proteins. Proteins are long chains of amino acid molecules. You just read that RNA is used to make proteins. RNA contains instructions for joining amino acids together. Cells contain hundreds of proteins. Each protein has a unique function. Some proteins help cells communicate with each other. Other proteins transport substances around inside cells. Some proteins, such as amylase in saliva, help break down nutrients in food. Other proteins, such as keratin, a protein found in hair, horns, and feathers, provide structural support. Lipids. Another group of macromolecules found in cells is lipids. A lipid is a large macromolecule that does not dissolve in water. Because lipids do not mix with water, they play an important role as protective barriers in cells. They are also the major part of cell membranes. Lipids play roles in energy storage and in cell communication. Examples of lipids are cholesterol, phospholipids, and vitamin A. Lipids can also be things like waxes and oils and fats. Those are types of lipids. Let's do the reading check. Why are lipids important to cells? Lipids are important to cells because lipids don't mix well with water, so they act as a protective barrier. And they make up cholesterols and hormones that play an important role in our bodies. Carbohydrates. One sugar molecule, two sugar molecules, or a long chain of sugar molecules make up carbohydrates. So again, sugar molecules are the monomers that make up the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates store energy. They provide structural support and are needed for communication between cells. Sugars and starches are carbohydrates that store energy. Fruits contain sugars. Breads and pastas are mostly starch. The energy in sugars and starches can be released quickly through chemical reactions in cells. Cellulose is a carbohydrate in the cell wall in plants that provides structural support. Key concept check. What basic substances make up a cell? The basic substances that we've learned about are the four macromolecules: nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. Okay, let's look at the lesson 1 review on page 502. Use the vocabulary. The blank blank states that the cell is the basic unit of all living things. That is one tenet of the cell theory. Number 2, distinguish between a carbohydrate and a lipid. Well, carbohydrates are sugars that store energy. They're made up of a chain of sugars. They provide structural support and they're needed for communication. But lipids are fats. They are not soluble in water and they act as a protective barrier in the cells. Number 3, use the term nucleic acid in a sentence. One sentence you could use would be that nucleic acids are made up of nucleotides and they store genetic information. Number 4, which macromolecule is made from amino acids? Is it A, lipid, B, protein, C, carbohydrate, or D, nucleic acid? The macromolecule made from amino acids is B, protein. Number 5. Describe how the invention of the microscope helped scientists understand cells. Well, the invention of the microscope enabled scientists to see the structure and function of the cells. Before they had a microscope, they did not know about cells because they could not see them. Number 6, compare the functions of DNA and proteins in a cell. Okay, so to answer the question, the differences between the functions of DNA and proteins in a cell. The DNA stores genetic information, while proteins are used for things like communication between cells, the transport of materials, structural support, and the breakdown of nutrients in the process of using enzymes, and enzymes are proteins. But let's look at what they talked about earlier. DNA is used to make RNA, and RNA is used to make protein, so they're very much related. The code on DNA is what is used to make the RNA. The RNA code then tells the ribosomes which amino acids to put together to make proteins. So that's how they are related. Number 7 says to summarize. Copy and fill in the graphic organizer below to summarize the main principles of the cell theory. The principles of the cell theory are: the cell is the smallest unit of life. All living things are made of one or more cells, and all new cells come from pre-existing cells. Number 8, analyze. How does the structure of the water molecule shown below enable it to interact with other water molecules? Well, each water molecule has an area that's more negative, the oxygen area, and an area that's more positive, the hydrogen area. The negative oxygen areas can attract positive hydrogens on other nearby water molecules, and the hydrogens in the positive area of the water molecule can attract the negative oxygens from other water molecules. Number 9, summarize the functions of lipids in cells. The lipids provide protective barriers around cells, and they play roles in energy storage and cell communication. And number 10, hypothesize why carbohydrates are found in plant cell walls. Carbohydrates are found in plant cell walls because they provide structural support.